Two upcoming titles, Cyberpunk 2077 and World of Warcraft Shadowlands. One of these games has been delayed. The other has implemented crunch time, overworking employees in order to release on time. And you'll never guess which is which. Or maybe you will. Y'all are pretty smart. Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include the boss of Cyberpunk's developers having to go back on his word, a number of Diablo Community Project updates, some other action RPG news, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the video description below, but right before you skip ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes and stay up to date with gaming news highlights. But right before we dive in, just a quick heads up that you have until the end of October to get your name on the Rikers Raiders 2020 banner. In past years, we've done t-shirts, we've done posters, and we even had a Raider banner that we've brought with us to BlizzCon. And this year, we wanted to make a form of Raider banner that you folks can also have. So for this year, we're going with a wall tapestry. Bigger design, more visible names, and all you have to do to get your name on it is be a Patreon supporter by the end of October. Even $1 single gets your name on the Raider banner. In our first topic, World of Warcraft Shadowlands has been delayed. In a message to fans on the official WoW website, executive producer John Haidt stated that they're delaying the release of Shadowlands to later this year. Quote, "It's become clear we need a little more time for additional polish and to balance and iterate on some interlocking pieces, particularly those related to the endgame. In the meantime, we're excited to announce that beginning October 13th, we will be releasing the Shadowlands pre-patch." Now, while this is disappointing news to a lot of WoW fans, it's also reassuring. This is a classic old-school Blizzard move. Blizzard historically always was about when it's ready. They weren't afraid to delay things to get them just right. There's an old adage about, in the end, they won't remember if it was late, they'll remember that it was great. And so hopefully this is a positive indication of what's going on in the WoW team, that they're not necessarily being forced to adhere to release schedules to appease shareholders, but they can take their time when needed. In fairness though, as long as they release before the big holiday season, they'll still be able to capitalize on that Christmas income revenue earnings window. It would be a bit of a different story if they were delaying to the point of missing Christmas altogether. In other Activision Blizzard news, earlier this week, 20,000 Call of Duty Warzone players were banned for cheating. And this was right as the game was beginning its 6th season. Now back in April, developer Infinity Ward banned 70,000 cheaters and warned that more ban waves would be coming. Then this summer, Activision started to take legal action against the manufacturers of cheats. And in a follow-up later this week, Infinity Ward tweeted, quote, "Since launch, the team has banned over 200,000 accounts for cheating across Warzone and Modern Warfare. We are continuing to deploy additional security updates and added backend enforcement tools. Zero tolerance for cheating." And hey, they hardly had to threaten anyone's family. In other news, CD Projekt Red, the developers of Cyberpunk 2077, are implementing mandatory crunch until the game's release. This is significant because the company previously promised that they would not do this, that they would not force mandatory overtime, and that's what's happening. Mandatory 6-day weeks for the next few weeks until the November release. As reported by Bloomberg, CD Projekt Red boss Adam Badovsky told employees via email this week, quote, "Starting today, the entire studio is in overdrive." He went on to say, quote, "I take it upon myself to receive the full backlash for the decision. I know this is in direct opposition to what we've said about crunch. It's also in direct opposition to what I personally grew to believe a while back, that crunch should never be the answer. But we've extended all other possible means of navigating the situation." Now, Polish labor laws enforce that this overtime must be paid. These laws also put a limit on how much overtime per week is possible, and this is where this one extra day comes in. Following Bloomberg's report, Badovsky took to Twitter and stated, quote, "This is one of the hardest decisions I've had to make. but everyone is well compensated for every extra hour they put in. And like in recent years, 10% of the annual profit our company generates in 2020 will be split directly among the team. Now, Cyberpunk has been delayed multiple times. originally slated for an April 2020 release date, then pushed to September, now pushed to late November. It seems any further delays and they're gonna miss what we were just talking about before, that holiday 2020 season, which is a big time to sell games. Pushing into the new year could have a drastically negative effect on game sales. And when he says we've extended all other possible means of navigating the situation, I imagine that's what he's referring to, because you could just delay the game again. That's another means of navigating this. But I guess they're not willing to miss that window. Onto our action RPG news. Beginning with Path of Exile. Earlier this week, the devs released a blog post on what they're working on for Heist Week 2. Some important topics included increasing the value of talismans and incentivizing players to prioritize reward room chests by moving some of the special rewards from main path chests into reward room chests. Later in the week, we got the official patch notes preview for 3.12.3, but we also got a very welcome hotfix, making the Rogue Harbor now a private area for only you and your party members. Having the Rogue Harbor be a public zone introduced a number of issues, and so this is a very welcome change. Onto some Wolcen news. The devs seem to have released some form of a teaser in the form of an image, and I encourage you folks to sound off with what you see here, because to me, I see one big footprint in a foreground, some kind of Godzilla-like dinosaur footprint, another footprint further ahead, a huge amount of distance between them suggesting something truly massively tall, an obvious bloodstain indicating danger, a human for scale, and there's something in front of the human that I at first thought was a shadow, but that's not the shadow because his shadow goes over to the right. There's a shape that is arguably reminiscent of a Christmas tree. So is this a suggestion that whatever is coming will be coming for the Christmas season? Now, for a while we've been waiting for Wolcen's big content update that would bring seasons. Last we checked, that was going to happen in the fall, and we haven't gotten any recent word on an update to that. Now, Wolcen is a game that had a very rough launch, but in my opinion, it's a game with a lot of potential, and it had a very unfortunate launch. I personally feel that it should have been delayed a bit, because if it had released in the state that it is now, it would have been much better received. I do believe, though, if they come out with a really solid Season 1 content patch, it could revitalize and save the game. Onto some Torchlight 3 news. We got a release date, October 13th. The game will be releasing on PS4, Xbox One, and PC, with a Nintendo Switch release in the future. I was actually surprised by this. Surprised that the game is releasing so soon, particularly in a year filled with delays. To me, this is a lot earlier than I expected the game to release. I was thinking maybe by the end of the year. Alpha's been going on for a few months now, perhaps. The devs have done some iteration on designs following feedback, made some distinct improvements throughout the alpha, and seems they're now ready for release. Onto some last Epoch news. The devs gave us a preview of upcoming beta patch 0.7.10. This patch will introduce loot filters, which we'd spoken of in a previous video. It'll also include sweeping changes to defenses, and they'll have a blog post coming in the future fully explaining that. There's some significant changes to chapters 2 and 3, as well as visual updates to chapter 6. They posted some before and after screenshots. Definitely some great visual improvements there. They're changing skill respecs to make them less punishing. There will still certainly be a cost to respecking, but that cost won't be quite as steep. They're also making changes to the crafting system to include critical successes, which will cause an affix to be upgraded to a higher tier. They're also including new skills, and while multiplayer is being tested internally, it is not going to be in the next patch. The last Epoch devs have been doing great. The biggest concern to me really is the multiplayer aspect. A number of game releases in recent months and years have shown how difficult it is to nail that multiplayer part. Wolcen, for instance, suffered from this, and Wolcen had at least 6 months, if not almost a year, of public multiplayer beta before release. When I played my preview build before the game released, it was only single player. I encountered almost no bugs. The game releases and the multiplayer was so buggy. I would hate to see last Epoch suffer the same fate, but for multiplayer to be introduced so late to the public for testing, this is the first thing raising some concerns for me about this game. On to Diablo news. The Diablo 4 quarterly update went live this week. We have a full video talking about it. The blog post features an entirely new skill tree. I encourage you folks to check out my video on the topic. The Diablo 3 PTR also got started this week for Season 22, and in case you haven't seen it, we've got our full video analyzing the patch notes for the season. In general, I'm certainly surprised by the amount of support Diablo 3 has suddenly started getting. It feels like it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2-ish years ago, that the game felt like it was going into maintenance mode, that it was being handed over to the Classic Games team. There was that rumor, and that rumor was effectively confirmed. This was right before the Switch launch, because in an interview, the person they had talking about Diablo 3 releasing on Switch was the head of the Classic Games team. So again, that confirmed that Diablo 3 was in the Classic Games team. But then we started getting new sets, newer, bigger season themes, and this now leads me to believe that it's probably gone away now from Classic back onto the Diablo team, that some decision was made to keep supporting Diablo 3 in a bigger way than originally intended. Now, of course, we can't compare a Diablo 3 season to a Path of Exile League, but the game is certainly getting more support in the last couple years than it was getting in the couple years before that. And if you want to hear the thoughts of some other Diablo 3 community members on this patch, on Season 22, I encourage you folks to check out the first episode of the Danctuary podcast, a newly revealed project that brings together members, streamers, content creators within the Diablo community to discuss all things Diablo. All kinds of different topics will be covered, all kinds of different faces will be featured. I encourage you folks to go over, check out episode 1, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Now, as for some other community projects, Project Diablo 2 got a release date, November 6th. We've spoken about it before, but Project Diablo 2 is a very ambitious Diablo 2 mod. It's looking to preserve the classic experience while improving the game. Increased build diversity, item rebalances, new endgame content, quality of life changes, and much more. Also, popular Diablo 2 mod Median Sigma XL has announced its patch 1.7, slated to release October 9th. The patch will include a huge rework to the Druid, quality of life improvements, and more. Also, I wanted to draw your attention to a project that lets you play Diablo 1 on your phone. We've spoken about such projects before, but they required a little bit of effort on your part. By just following the link in the video description, you could be playing the shareware version of Diablo 1 on your phone within seconds. And if you're willing to take the extra steps of actually downloading and unpackaging the actual MPQ, the data file for the base game, you could actually play the entire game. But as simple as possible, one click and you're playing Diablo 1 on your phone. Now, some other cool stuff. Redditor Lethal Beaver shared this image of some ancient Diablo 2 merchandise, which led to Redditor Balrog following up with an image of his collection. From top left to bottom right, that's the Necromancer, the Corrupt Rogue, Baal's Minion of Destruction, the Unraveler, the Barbarian, and Diablo himself. And while we're on this nostalgia trip, Redditor Elizabeth Moon shared this old favorite of mine, a Diablo 2 live-action commercial from way back in the day. I always love this commercial, and I encourage you folks to go give it a watch. And that's gonna wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video, in which we cover the playable Diablo 2 fan remake that is in the works. Also, as a reminder, you have until the end of October to get your name on the 2020 Raider banner, patreon.com/Riker. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.